So we'll have to start. Please go ahead.
So, thank you and for maybe cutting your lunch to come back quick to participate in the PDPB's discussion. My name is Alain Aina. I'm one of the co-authors, and Abel, call me Elisha, will be helping me today to engage this community again in improving our PDP process. Let me first start with asking the room, how many people in the room have read one of the versions of the PDPB's proposal? Okay, good. And I also think, and we all saw this morning, some of the limitations our current PDP has. And we have been trying to improve, to add provisions on how we manage the PDP. And I will ask staff if you could put on the policy. Can you put on the policy text? So this is the policy, the policy proposal, the PDPBs. So can you scroll up? I want us to show people what we are trying to do. Okay, it seems to be a bit longer, a long document where we're trying to redefine what is the consensus. Okay, scroll. How we reach consensus, and then how do we deal with the policy proposal? And you can see we are now trying to make things. wait. So now we have. Wait. Please, we are going too fast. We have now for the policy proposal, we're going to have a adoption phase. That means anything come, we discuss. Do we accept it? Do we accept the problem statement? So then to avoid the kind of we have policy, we are discussing policy, but anytime people come and show like I disagree with the problem statement, so we have to first agree. Okay, do we have a problem? Yes. If you have a problem, then we move to the next section, which is discussion phase. Okay, and the current PDP said you put a policy proposal there, we discuss 30 days, we come to face. No, we are changing it. We'll go for adoption phase, go to discussion phase. The policy must mature enough to go to a review, like we had a draft, then we go to the review. Okay, so only policy proposal who has matured enough in terms of discussion, etc., goes to review phase, and then we'll come to the concluding phase. So only policy, as I said, who make it to the review are presented at face-to-face meeting. So that means the policy has to be discussed, has been improved, etc., pass review. At the end of the review phase, the policy qualified to go to the PPM, public policy meeting. Then you have the concluding phase, which is what we call last call, then ratifications, and how do we deal with emergency, varying the process, etc., And then we have appeal. We have appeal process. So this is basically what we are trying to do. I'm just trying to summarize. But our PDP use a working group. Our PDP use a working group. Then we have attached to this document, which is the process itself, we attach a working group guideline. Can you show the working group guideline? The other document? Okay. So we have a separate document which is a policy working group guideline and procedure. And this document basically is talking about the role of the chair of the working group, what the role of the chair before, during the meeting, after the meeting, okay, and how we elect chairs. You notice this morning that we have some issue. How do we elect chairs? How do we remove chair? And then how do we deal with resignation of chairs, etc. Okay, and we also give method for chairs, how they can moderate the working group, so you can see it. So, but what we did was, the guideline is a separate document, but is part of the policy in the PDP. So that means you cannot change the guideline without going through the PDP. Okay. So this is, so we have two documents and trying to, so just to summarize what our policy, this PDP is at version 3. So what we're going to show you now is the changes from version 2 to version 3. Now, okay, you can go back to the slide. And this version 3 has been influenced, and I want to acknowledge that the change we have in the version 3s are based on discussion and contribution we have from Owen Delon, SM, on the list, and I think Owen even helped with some text. Okay, and I also hear this morning that Jody also put something on the list. I haven't read, but I think you have chance to explain what you suggested. So I'll conclude and say this: we all agree we should fix our PDP. What we have there may not be perfect, so please help us. But I also want to call for the thing that we may not have it perfect now, but we can keep updating it. So this is my call. So for the working group, and then I will now give the floor to Abel to just go through slides to summarize the difference between version 2 and version 3, quick, and then we can go for. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alan. My name is Komi Elicha. I will present in French. But some technical words may come up in English. Ok. Donc, la politique que nous allons présenter s'appelle...
Donc, the policy we are going to present is named the Policy Development Piece. So, we are going to present the PDP piece. As said a while ago, Alain, it's about better clarifying the data, the deadline, the guidelines to follow for the working group, and for the driving consensus. So the policy comes from intensive discussion that happened in 2016, and many agreements have been done, as we have mentioned it right now. Noticingly, the RFC in 1988 and what is being done in the other areas. So, what is the aim of this policy or opposition? It's about to determine clearly the process which conduct to the consensus, how does the working group is called to function, what are the procedures, and on which case the board is going to use some emergency measures in order to go forward a proposal of a policy, for example. Also, the policy determine what are the responsibilities of the chairs, what are their roles, how is the election is going to be handled, and what is the procedure of the resignation.
Ok. Donc voici le résumé de ce que nous proposons.
What we propose in the politic is to define the process of the working group, designing a policy development process around 2 chairs, defining the roles and responsibilities of both chairs, detailing the consensus process, and providing the different phases for a policy proposal life cycle. The first version has been submitted April 28, 2006. Also, we have had some commentary at Lagos meeting in November 2017. And finally, in the list, as said a while ago, we have received some comments as well. And those comments are about the clarification on, or the difference between the clarification on the RIF consensus. So we are clarifying that process in the whole document. We are waiting for the consensus to come in order to avoid any confusion. We clarify as well what this, how board acts for the process of selecting document editor. So that the lecturer can design or even launch a call so that he can be the editor of the document in order to reflect, in fact, the different comments and objection which happen in the proposal of policy. It is the point 2. The point 2 clarify the implementation date of a policy which has been adopted by the working group. So in the second version, the dates or the maximum deadline was linked to the last call, was linked to the last call period. The comments of the staff would suggest that we will link them at the date of ratification. We have removed from the second version the preference of Afrinic bylaws so as to perfect the PDP process to clarify variants by board. What are the key elements of this policy, which is about the review of the process PDP? The point 1 is about the policy development process, or the way the working group is going to function, or the phase of the policy. We have defined a point number 2, which is the rough consensus, and how we have overcome to the rough consensus. How does the working group is operated? How do we evaluate the objection? How do we try to let's say, how do we try to monitor the behavior of the members in the working group so as to be productive? The third point is about the election. How are the chairs elected? And when they are elected, when there is resignation, what are the rules to follow? When there is no volunteer in order to replace a chair who has resignated, who has to replace him, who has temporarily to replace him. Here we have the feedbacks of the meeting of November in Lagos. I already had them, I already presented them. Overall, it is about the removal of the bylaw reference, the clarification of the date of removal, and the second point, which is the staff which also noted that any reference to the ads have ratified, and some participants were asking whether we can have the possibility to the chair to handle the working group during the meeting, during the face-to-face meeting as this one, in order to handle the remote, and as well to clarify the appeals committee in this proposal will nullify the existing one should the policy go through, or either we are going to keep the proposal we have for the time being in the present proposal. The element is about the adoption phase, the discussion phase, and then the conclusion phase. We're going to present right now the scope of each phase. The adoption, we're going to evaluate the problem statement of the policy proposal. The discussion phase is the much intensive phase where the initiators of the policy will hope to have many opinions and objections. The review phase, it is the addition of the document. It means that it's not about only objecting to a policy proposal, but we have as well to propose a reformulation or a formulation which goes toward the way of our remarks or our objection. The last call or the concluding phase is for having eventually some point of view which are not read sheet or the chairs wish move policy to last call. As chairs or can decide to either send back the proposal to the previous phases or otherwise propose the withdrawal of the policy. The rough consensus. How does the chair overcome to judge the rough consensus, or what are the guidelines which are given to the chair to be able to be brought to the rough consensus? We all agree that the objective of the working group is to come to a consensus on a policy which resolve a technical problem. So the chairs, what we propose is them to be able to categorize when a policy is proposal, so that they can categorize the objection, a major objection, and then the minor objections. It's not, it doesn't fall to the participant's hand to say that this objection, I have a major objection or whatever, but this suppose that the chair or the chairs are well skilled in order to ask when there is objection, to be able to precise the objection is of which nature, and to ask to the working group to comment or to make an assessment. And the major objections constitutes of objections which, if they are not resolved, can't enable, we can't evaluate. The minor objections, it means that the one which object find that, oh, I can maybe handle it, I think there is a problem, but I can at least handle it. If the problem is not, if you don't bring solution, I can nevertheless live with that. I can accept. How does the working group operate, or how do we moderate the working group? When a policy is proposed, the working group has to know between the third which one is the reference. We must have a reference or a proposal of policy, because it's the two-thirds to be able to decide of the proposal we have to take. I think you are much more skillful to handle, or which proposal is to be taken or whatever, in order to enable the community to have some objection or the final results, to know exactly to whom are they going to talk to. How do we moderate the input by chairs? We know that the community is various. We come from different culture, so we moderate, let's say, the inputs following. Is it a new input, or is it a new comment? Is it something? Is it about something minor? Does the comment to get out of the framework, the discussion framework? Does the objection comes on due time? The question deserves to be asked. we give or we describe of how does the third can try to moderate to say, okay, we have listened to you, but we think that your objection has already been raised, and we have tried to bring some changes, okay, to the formulation or the operation of the proposal. So at last we give the possibility to the chairs, because there's a guideline in the working group as well, because the list IPD during the face-to-face meeting, we give the power to the chairs to be able to say no, to refuse that a participant intervene, because the working group, the fair doesn't have any evolution or can't bring, let's say, a constructive change, but all is to be done on the basis of these listed elements above. So appropriate all the minor, out of scope, not timely. The election of the chairs. The chairs are elected by the working group after a call for volunteers. We say that the working group know the face-to-face meeting, and let the chair be physically present in order to assess the discussion, the comment in a realistic way. And we think that during the mandate of 2/3, which is of 2 years, so that they can be present at least 1 or 2 meetings, so that they can participate in order to prove its engagement, its commitment.
When a chair resigns, in the event of resignation of a chair, AFRINEC CEO should lead the working group to the election of an interim chair, which will be assisted by a staff. So what are the decisions or actions that can be appealable? The suspension of posting privileges on the mailing list. Let me recall that the discussion are not done on a face-to-face basis, but on the mailing list. The working group now, before presenting a proposal, this proposal should evolve on the mailing list until the review phase, basically. And we say that we actually may prevent or moderate temporarily participants from posting for reasons related to code of conduct. This participant may lodge an appeal during the discussion phase if there is any objection pertaining to the chair or to the way the chair leads the discussions on the mailing list. A participant may lodge an appeal. The appeal procedure is well defined in the proposal. During the review and the final phase, a participant may appeal a decision from the chair to prevent that chairs act as dictators. The working group should be able to provide for any appeals, whatever the case. How do we designate the appeal committee? We believe that this proposal is reliable and realistic, and it's also independent. We have the appeal committee which will be made up by a person representing the board member. We'll have someone from the COE, the Council of Elders, and we'll have also an ex-chair or an ex-co-chair. We believe that these three persons are elected by the community, and they have experience, and they also have some confidence, a good standing. Here it's about identifying the conditions in which the board or the working group may decide to change the process in order to develop policy. What is the difference between version 2 and version 3? As we already mentioned, in the whole document, we need to have a rough document. In the policy proposals, the documents are selected through call. If you don't have any volunteer, one chair may act as editor in order to reflect the observation from the working group. Policy ratification now. Here we are talking about conditions in which the board may actually adopt a policy proposal. What is the relationship? And when the board should use this emergency procedure to adopt a policy, he should be accountable with regard to the community. Likewise, we provide more details. We're no longer talking about reference to bylaws, but lastly, this is about the deadline for implementation of a ratified policy. For 1 year, we've been making progress. We've been collecting points, viewpoints, and we all agree that the current PD point is silent on some issues. And we had the illustration this morning, and we do believe that it is urgent for us to take action. I thank you for your kind attention.
So following presentation by authors to the community, we'll check for staff comments. After that, questions and comments from the floor and online. This particular revision of the policy proposal has only been with us a few days, so there's not been commentary from the community on the mailing lists. Madhvi?
In regard to staff comments, we do not have any further comments on this version at the moment.
Okay, so the floor is open now for questions and comments online and within the room. Thank you. And please let's try to keep it short and sweet.
Okay, Jordi Palet. I want to support this proposal. I want to tell also my experience. I am doing policy proposals in almost all the regions. Well, I will say all the regions right now. I have been doing so for many years, and I think one consideration that the community need to understand is that, especially in the PDP, but in general in all the policy proposals, it's really difficult to make it perfect the first round. So that's my reason to support it. I think it's quite good. It's very, very close to what we have at RIPE, and I think it's one of the best PDPs that we have in the community. I made just a couple of comments, and this is leave for improvement in the future. I actually had reached consensus in my policy proposal last week in LACNIC in Panama for also a change in the PDP process, and I think some of the things that I considered when doing that policy proposal are also useful here. Very, very quickly, one of them is that I really think, and there was a comment this morning also about that, I really think asking the chairs to decide about the consensus during the meeting is no way. They are superheroes, but not really Superman to take that decision. And I will suggest that you improve, if approved in this round, in the next, with a new version, you really take in consideration that they need to have about 2 weeks, I will say, after the meeting for deciding about the consensus, and then I will suggest 1 extra week after the last call. Okay, this will give them a better balance of looking at all the comments and so on. And the other thing that I believe need to be very clear is a very good definition in the policy itself of both consensus and last call. I suggested some explicit text in the mailing list, so you can take a look on that. And finally, my last input is what it was. Okay, I understand from your policy proposal that you want to make sure that the chairs consider also the inputs, not just in the meeting, but also in the mailing list. I think that's not sufficiently explicit, and I can help to provide some text, or maybe I already did, I don't recall right now, about how to improve the proposal to do that as well. But because I really think the balance between the people that participate in the meetings and the people that can contribute in the mailing list, it's quite different. Not everybody can pay their expenses to come to the meetings, and obviously you will have more contributors if you really take them in consideration, because that's a much broader community. Thank you.
Thank you. On
DeLeon, concerned internet citizen. Since my name was brought up as having provided text, I want to make it clear that just because I've provided text doesn't mean I support the policy. I will contribute to trying to improve things even in cases where I don't necessarily think that they should move forward in some cases, and this is one of those cases. The current version of the policy has not been out long enough for me to really have a chance to review it in detail, so I'll provide more detailed comments on the mailing list, but I would definitely like to suggest that it would be inappropriate given the time frame for us to even consider moving this policy forward from a judgment of consensus at this meeting, because people just haven't had enough time to review it adequately. I know Madhvi said she didn't have any comments from staff at this time. Has staff even had time to adequately review it, and is that a decision that there are no comments on this version of the proposal, or is it just you haven't found anything to comment on yet? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have just a little comment to do, a question, maybe a remark. This morning there was some issue concerning the online participation. So can I suggest you to maybe clarify what can be done concerning online participation, especially when you have to reach consensus? Does it necessary to add something to clarify what can be done by online people or not? I think you should clarify it in your draft policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Elkins. Initially, when this policy came out, I didn't like it very much. However, it's getting better and better, and I don't think it's quite ready yet. But I can see that I should be adding and contributing to this particular policy, and I would say in another 6 months, this policy could get pretty near perfect. Thank you. So I don't currently support it in its current state, but it's looking very good.
I think I do not want to put a time limit on when the policy will mature. I like policy to mature by itself when we all find it acceptable. However, I suggest that you run some code for me. Would you at least take one example of a contentious issue and run it through the process and show me that it does advance it? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Paulus Nyirenda from Malawi. Yeah, I think that the policy is in a very rough state right now, and yeah, at the moment I think there's room for a lot of improvement. Maybe some of the areas are consideration of superlatives, where the policy is asking for things to be done completely, like all objections resolved, and consensus is when everyone agrees. I think these things like these need to be refined. I'm also concerned that there are some sections like the board process for them making a policy. Right now it's lying right at the end of the policy where the appeal process doesn't touch it. I think it needs to be moved so people can appeal against it if indeed it fits in this policy. I'm not sure if things like COE should be coming into the policy. I think that if there are committees created in the policy, the committees should be able to decide on themselves who their chairs should be, rather than someone imposing the chairs on them. So the policy looks somewhat good, but it needs a lot of improvement at the moment. I don't really support it in the current form, but I think it has a bright future.
Thank you.
So we can continue the RDC.
De la RDC. I was going to say that I have a few comments on the procedure as it is set now. What I read in those lists, I realize, I don't know if there are steps that are repeating, but I have the feeling that we're not making headway. When the interlocutor uses the same thing, repeats himself, I wonder why you are repeating what you have already said. In your proposal, did you provide something? Because my take is that the co-chair is here as the moderator, and he should support the fluidity of the conversation, because we have reached 1, 2, 3 steps of the conversation, and now we are at step 10. Something will just come and repeat what has been said in step 2. So I believe that, in my opinion, the moderator should be able to say, well, this has been already said 10 times, there is some evolution, and so on and so forth. And this will avoid us to be in a like endless discussions. That's why we're not making headway. Someone have come up with a magic sentence, and we're repeating that several times, you see? I remember when you made a presentation in Lagos, you had a diagram of the various steps of the procedure. And I think it was step 4 or 5 when you propose to avoid repetition, because you believe that the current procedure had a problem. And we have reached a step where any detractor any person would object to that will have to start from scratch. So other policies are victim of this objection, but even the policy which is likely to correct or repair this mistake is victim of the same objection. Now my question is, what do we do? Because we have to go through the older policy in order to ratify the new one. If at any time we have to get to the same problem, then 99 people agrees and one disagrees. And then he may say, I do not agree. And since I do not agree, the community does not agree. And then we're not gonna make any breakthrough. I remember the main complaint was that since we bank on the same procedure, how are we going to get through? Merci.
Opposed to this policy, although the PDP itself have its own flaws for now, but this updated version is insufficient itself as well. That's why I do not see the point of changing to this newer version when it is itself insufficiencies is obvious. Thank you.
So last speaker, please. Vivian. Okay, you said the the proposal is insufficient in itself. Could you please clarify? The authors didn't get that.
What I mean is that the PDP itself, the version now, it has its own flaws, but this new version does not completely solve all the problems, so it has its own insufficiency. That's why I don't see the point of changing to when this proposed version has some flaws. That's what I mean. I hope I make myself clear. Thank you.
Okay. Next, please.
This morning we had an issue because we discussed around our policy. This proposal has come to fill the gap identified in our system. I wish to concur with you. It's true that there are some things to correct, and I fully agree that if we have any input, as Jody say, we may add them and make progress. But continuing to say that we're rejecting this is just accepting. So the confusion, and the mess we note in Africa. Things we want to move forward, we need to go on this and accept the policy and then try to correct as best as we can what we have. So I fully support this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, please.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. Usman Musa from Niger. I did appreciate a significant breakthrough in this discussion. We need to have a functional framework. In my humble opinion, the most important thing that we are about to address is that notion of consensus. To reach a consensus, the central element, the driving force for a consensus is arguments. And when we say argument, we mean justification of the viewpoint. That's why when you try to come up with amendments or major objections or minor objections, I would like that we couple them in the following manner. Once you raise an objection, you may describe that as minor, as major, and someone else may consider that as minor. But as you make the proposal, you give each and everyone the possibility of appreciating, but you need to couple them. If you make an objection, you need to couple it with an amendment. Then from this viewpoint, the fact of saying I do not agree will no longer be accepted. The fact of just saying I agree, this is really low. This is not sufficient to reach consensus. So we need this coupling, and in this point, the only element beyond people, beyond their ambitions, the only central element would be the document. We need to specify that at the end, this is a document of the community. So the personal viewpoints which have been expressed have evolved, but these viewpoints are no longer within the responsibility of the one that formulated. Therefore, this is a good perspective. We are about to reach a consensus on this approach. I thank you for your kind attention. Merci.
I heard some comment about sufficiency, but I did not hear what was missing. So I'm a little bit, uncertain. But I just wanted to also say that no matter how hard we work, there will be always some small stones in the ice. Okay, there will always be. So we should, at some point, which is really coaching your judgment, at some point have to kind of push us on, edge us on to arrive at a consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, my name is Daniel again. I think earlier in the day I've heard that the PDP has broken, and this could be possibly a fixing. So if that is true, then this document needs to really mature. So it needs a lot of cooking and a lot of cooks to also bring a lot of ingredients. Because at the end of the day, that is the bedrock of what sustains the PDP and makes it functional. So we should not be in any rush at all to build the foundation, because that's important. The foundation is important. Any other thing we're going to do is going to be built on that. So let's take time to bring many cooks, and I'm happy that I'm hearing cooks and ingredients being dropped in the pot, so that we can come up with a possible document that will not break easily. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madvi will take online, and the last two people on the queue, we will close the queue. Thank you.
Andrew Aston, Liquid Telecommunications. Firstly, on 3.4.1, there is little to state what constitutes a minor versus a major. If the objector believes that it is a major problem for them, then it is a major problem for them. However, 3.4.2 then goes on to define major objection as something the community agrees is a major objection. This is a problem because something can have a major impact on a company that may not impact the wider community, either negatively or positively. That does not lessen the major objection. Secondly, on the issue of anonymous proposals, this issue has been raised many times and never adequately addressed. We are a transparent community. If we have nothing to hide and our proposals are legitimate and meant to serve this community, then there is no need for anonymous authors. Further to this, there is the issue of the policy co-chairs becoming editors of the document, which is in direct violation of neutrality. The co-chairs judge consensus. It violates all semblance of corporate governance to have the editor of a document adjudicate on the consensus of the same document. Thirdly, the AFRINIC CEO cannot lead the working group since the AFRINIC CEO is an ex officio board member and hence responsible for the ratification of policy. And this again contradicts good corporate governance and is a conflict of interest. Fourth, the bylaws place explicit restrictions on the duties and mandates of the Council of Elders, and the expansion of these duties as per this policy are out of scope of this mandate, and therefore are an issue that require a modification of the bylaws. I point out, Andrew points out, that the Council of Elders is defined as a committee, and that has a purely advisory role and is not consulted in any way to adjudicate on issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. Oh, okay. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Jean-Baptiste from Burkina Faso. I should like to say that we have an opportunity to support a policy which makes it possible to address a number of issues within our community. In every AFRINIC meetings, we always face the same issues. And for me, although we have minor points to correct, we should not actually withdraw, we should not report that. It is as if we are crashing and in a plane and we say let's crash, and then the mechanism to stop the crash is not yet operational. At a given time, the community should think about its future and take a decision to adopt something that will help us to improve ourselves. So if we are looking for perfection, then we may lose time, you see? Thank you. Merci.
Bonsoir à tous. Moi, je m'appelle Kossi Amesenou.
My name is Kossi Amesenou. I'm the Vice President of the Internet Forum in Benin. I am pleased that we have a policy which helps us to have clarity, and this is a concept which seems complex in the light of everything we have said. We have at least something, we have reached a consensus, and we have to manage this consensus. The notion of consensus, I think, has been raised several times. So today, with the decision of the chair, I said, are we in a consensus process? Consensus means for some environment that when we do not have the certainty as the moderator of activity, if we do not understand the trend, so we have to decide. It's not about number, actually. If we do not understand the trend, we may actually call on a vote and think, for example, we may say, who are those who think that we can go to such direction? Some people may have some fixed position, some people may have some controversial position, etc. So by taking all that into account, we may have a process which will lead to a consensus. Sometimes those who make policy proposals, are not those that will finalize the policy. So the problem of consensus is at the whole chain. For example, I propose some policy, people come up with comment, but it's not obvious that I can understand all the comments. It's always useful to have a committee which actually takes into account all the comments and put them in the initial document. And this version may be sent to the community for additional comments. But whenever we make comments, we should not go backward. We need to make a process. So someone may just say we have already validated some section, but once again, this my suggestion is to be able to validate at least this document. Thank you.
Thank you.
What will be minor for the working group will be major for a company. First of all, the working group is not for companies. I thought my grandmother can participate in the PDP. Secondly, the moment we start thinking like that, we expose ourselves to blackmail by a company, and I do not feel comfortable with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, take 5 minutes. Author's response.
Not to respond, because as many people have said here, this is not we the authors against the community. So this is a community work. Okay. So maybe we can also provide some comment on, but not to respond. Okay. Odi, when I was clear, you provided text because I don't want to take your right to say you support or you do not support. I kept this right for you. It's the first time for me, maybe I may be wrong, that I'm seeing a policy proposal discussion at AFRINIC where nobody say I oppose. So maybe someone should go to the mic and oppose. So that means we are making progress. Though for me, I feel like this is something great. Okay, many people express that there is a room for improvement. Some have proposed text, and I have on my list that Dr. Paulo said he will provide some text. Mark said he will provide text. Daniel didn't commit for text, but I expect at least some discussions. So this seems to be okay. So as far as people are willing to contribute, to contribute, so this is what it's about. We may not be happy, but we should propose something, not say I don't like it. Okay, propose text. Okay, propose text. So Georgie, thank you very much for your. We will look at them and see what we do with them. Okay. For the online, taking account the online people for the consensus, I think, which also is part of what Georgie is proposing. If you look at what we propose, is clear, and I agree with Georgie that we'll make it explicit, mailing listing. Otherwise, if you look at the new proposal, the proposal is focusing on objections. So the objection must be discussed on the list, and we clear the objection up to the consensus. So for me, it's implicitly saying that everything is happening on the mailing list, and we are clearing objection. But to make it explicit somewhere to say that, okay. So that means you do not need to come to face. Okay, you have to express yourself. You have to express yourself. And what I saw in this room is in one example, but I think in the future we'll not see, because I saw people in this room, I know they're on the RPD, they didn't say anything, but they now come to the mic and say, oh, there is a room for improvement. But room, well, where were you? We were discussing on the list. So maybe, and part of it is if you don't express yourself on the list, you come to face, there should be a reason for you to say, oh, okay. Otherwise, you look like, okay, we discussed on the list, you keep quiet, okay? You come to face and you express yourself. So we have really to focus to say that this thing must happen on the mailing list. If we come to face, that should be a reason why were you not active on the list to say it. We will not deny you, but we want people to know that for this working group to make progress, it's better that you express yourself on the list. Okay, but I hope we are making progress, and next time people should, if you don't want to go public on the RPD, you can write to the authors or write to the co-chairs to express your proposal, your improvement. So okay, maybe there are people who are not comfortable expressing themselves on RPD. So one option is write to us or write to the co-chairs, and we can manage it for you. The other thing I want to comment on is the objections, major, minors, or whatever it is. Okay, we may not agree what is major, what is okay, but as a working group, as regional internet registry managing numbers, we should know what is important and what is the impact of our policy proposal, etc. But in all cases, we are all fine, because the PDP said the guy objecting should contribute to the solutions. This is what I hear Dr. Tessa said. So if you come with something, with objection, you should come with amendment. Because it's not that I throw objection for you guys to go and figure out. No. The test is clear. It's the role of the proponent and the working group in general to try to overcome the objections. If we succeed, fine. If we don't, then the co-chairs has to overweight the pro and con, and we move on. So I think this is clear in the test. Otherwise, people throw objections and tell me I object, and then this is major for me, etc., etc. So if you are happy putting a major objection, you should be happy to propose a text or solution for it. So then we can all really think about before we comment on the thing. So the document is clear, and Abel presented it. We added something for the co-chairs. When on the list or at the face-to-face, when people say something, the co-chairs now can say, oh, this has been discussed before, please. Or this is out of scope, etc., etc. So if we don't have this kind of way of addressing things, we can keep bringing old issues. So that's why you saw on the slide is there. It could be minors, it can be out of scope. So but this thing is not exhaustive. So the co-chair may add what they want, but the idea is we trying to mark comment, objection, so that we don't keep repeating them, etc., etc. So it's part of what we are trying to do. So I think this is what I would say. Okay, for the policy proposal to be anonymous. Okay, the PDP does not say that the authors must be anonymous. It's options. So if I have a policy proposal which is good and I think I can carry it myself, I go. But we just want to make sure that people have a good idea, but they are not willing to go to the front to also submit and be anonymous. But we are not saying it's a must. It's optional. It's optional. This is important. By having something, and then we should agree on the may, might, shall, should, must. We didn't say shall. We didn't say should. No, we said it's options. Okay, it's optional, because we want to separate this thing of attaching individual to proposal, because when you propose something, it becomes a community document, and so this is what we are trying to do. But this is not mandatory, but it's optional. Because, and one rationale behind this, who tell you that Ale and Abel is the real authors of this document? There could be Jody, there could be Jaya, the real authors, but we are just the front end. We were just the front end. We were just the front end. Yes, and have more time. Because some people are not keen to be on the front. So this is why we say it's possible, but it's not. Okay. Same thing for the PDP, the co-chair being editor of the document. If you see, can you scroll up? Can you scroll up to no? They say the new thing, the red one. Where it is? No, one more.
Document editors.
Where is it? Quick. It was somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, here. So we are based on this comment from Andrew. We have changed the text. Look at the new text. The new text is say we set a call for working group to add to working group to act. No, for volunteer from the working group to ask a document editor on the policy proposal, or the co-chair can ask as editor if the working group lack volunteer and is willing to accept co-chairs as editors. So it's option. So we said co-chairs run a call to look for volunteer to edit the document. Okay, but if we lack volunteer and this working group is willing to accept the co-chairs, so you know, okay, me, I'm not a native English speaker, so maybe the text is not good enough to express this. If this is the case, please help us to have the correct text. But I think what is in there, we're clear. So the co-chairs should look for volunteer. But shall we let a good proposal die before because we don't have a volunteer to carry to edit the document? So this is the kind of, so we're doing something. Let's have options. Let's have options. So this is what we are trying to do, etc. So I think I've said you don't give me. So I will just stop here. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alain and other.
Alain, les autres auteurs. Donc c'est clair, les discussions
en current version of this policy proposal does not have enough support to proceed to last call as is. In line with the PDP, the policy proposal is hereby sent back to the list for further discussion and refinement. Thank you all very much. Thank you, others.